Number 1, apologies or substitutes, please.
I've got two apologies, Convener. Councillors Fotheringham and Councillor Lumgear, represented by Councillors Vaughan and McMillan Douglas, respectively.
Okay, thank you very much. And number 2, declarations of interest. Any colleagues got any declarations of interest? No, I see no hands going up. Okay, well, just accept there's none. Okay, so we'll move on to number 3. The minute, so submit the minute of the meeting of this committee, 17th of August 2021 for approval. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So if we move on to item number 4, information report by the Interim Director of Vibrant Communities and Sustainable Growth, Rapogee Housing Transition Plan update. Do you have any questions? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. Just a wee bit of clarification, actually, on page 23, where they're talking about, as well as continuing to provide second-hand furniture, white goods and starter packs, we will soon pilot the tenancies. I wonder if we could just get a bit of clarification around that. Will they still be using the furniture store in Arbroath and the resource store in Forfar?
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Durno contacted me with that question. Can I ask Mr. Morrow, or Mr. Morrow can maybe ask one of his team to address that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that for the question, Councillor Devine. As you rightly say, we're looking at offering of our services to include potential for furnished accommodation, and the reason for that is obviously we want to try and provide housing solutions for as many groups of people as we can, and that's a particular type of offering that we think another group of customers might be interested in. For a long time, as you know, we've been supporting the recycling furniture recycling projects in the different towns and using their services to provide furniture for our temporary accommodation, and that's certainly not going to change, and we see that, you know, continuing for many years to come. The offer of providing more furnished tenancies actually does provide the potential for additional income for the furniture recycling projects, and we would always use their services as the first port of call, and obviously use new furniture only when we can't access recycled furniture, because we are supportive, obviously, of every opportunity to recycle both furniture and other materials, and this is a great example of where we do that. And what I hope by extending our offering is we can actually extend the potential for those projects to be sustained over a longer term.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morrow.
Thank you. I really appreciate this, because I do recognise that so many people have absolutely nothing. So that's good, but it's also good for the resource store to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Speed, I think you're next.
Yep, thanks, Convener. Yeah, it was a few questions. Firstly, with regards to...
Councillor Speed, it's one question.
It's just one question?
One question each. It's an information report.
Okay.
So pick your question carefully.
I shall... Okay. Okay, so the council average rent is £288 approximately, and the private rent average is around £529 currently, which is almost double. And some private landlords still advertise no universal credit applicants, and I just wondered what work was being done, with the private rented sector to address some of those challenges.
Okay, Mr. Morrow, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And I think it's a good question, Councillor, if I may. We have now taken on 2 additional staff specifically to work with private sector landlords, and that's to achieve a number of things. It's to help provide additional advice for landlords, as well as providing additional and extra advice and tailored specific advice for some of our customers where the private rented sector is the best solution for them. Because clearly we want to encourage landlords to provide an improved offering and have better tenancy arrangements so that we sustain tenancies in that sector for longer. The level of rent is always a concern, I guess, across all sectors. Clearly, there's a balance to be achieved between landlords achieving a level of income, which is the reason generally the reason why they offer their properties up for let. But we want those rents to be affordable so that more customers in Angus can access that sector. Now, our social housing offering is clearly under pressure, and that's often the reason why we direct people that can access the private rented sector to landlords. And the two additional housing officers that we have are there to help cross the bridge, if you like, between the landlords and the tenants. And we hope that through discussion between both parties, we're able to support the tenants when they are in the private rent sector to stay there for longer.
Okay, thank you. Can I just encourage colleagues, obviously this is an information report, if they've got questions, quite a lot, they should ask them before the meeting or after the meeting, directly to the officer responsible for the report. So Councillor Duff, I think you're next.
Yep, Convener, thank you. A very parochial question. We're talking about homeless accommodation. Good to hear that we're providing furnished accommodation. Have we finally disposed of the homeless unit in Montrose in Queen's Close? And if we haven't, consider.
Mr. Morrow or Mr. Cochrane, one of you should be able to address that question.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Duff, no, the Queen's Close property has not yet been sold. Whether it's a question to reconsider is perhaps a question for Mr. Morrow.
I'm happy to come in there, Chair, if you like. I mean, I think it's a good question, Councillor. It has been problematic. As you know, we've marketed the property and we have had interest. There's been complexities around the title deeds and the layout of the property and how it sits within the townscape. It's a relatively complex area, as you know, and that proved to be one of the difficulties in following through on the sale. We're always happy to look at revisit the options if selling on the market is not being successful. So quite happy to discuss with Mr. Cochrane and yourself after the meeting if that's what you'd like.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Moore, I think you're next.
Thank you, Convener. Just one query, and it's mainly for clarity, and that is the table on page 24. From the look of it, it doesn't seem to add up. And I'm just wondering if we can get some clarity about that.
Mr. Morrow, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I think you're quite right, Councillor. There are some, I think, a better clarity could be provided in terms of that table. We've looked at the figures, and you're kind enough to send us a number of questions before committee that we were able to look at that. I think we're happy with the overall figures, but what I think we need to get better at is how we show that in the report. So what we're going to look at is describing that differently to ensure that it's clear for all members. So if you're happy with that, we'll do that and get back to you after the committee with a revised table. I think it'll show the same outcomes, I think, but obviously it'll make it a bit easier to understand, I think.
Okay, and you'll send that to all committee members, Mr. Morrow, yes?
Certainly will, yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Proctor. Sorry, you're on mute, Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, are we still going to be able to continue with the same service and banding and assistance that we've given to veterans in the past, particularly regarding homelessness? As this seems to be increasing across the sort of veteran spectrum.
Mr. Morrow, would you like to address that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks, Councillor Proctor. I mean, as you know, service leavers and veterans are always at the foremost in our minds, and that's why we have a commitment to providing as much advice and service as we can, and that commitment is certainly going to continue in terms of the rapid rehousing transition plan and actually all of our other allocation policies as well. So I can give you that firm commitment. You're quite right that there has been, I think the increase, it tends to come and go. Sometimes for a period we see an increased number of presentations coming from the particular group you describe, and then at other times it falls away again. I mean, I think there has been probably better information being given out to particular service users, and maybe as a result of information becoming more accessible, that we're actually seeing the increase in presentations. But when we do see the presentations, clearly, as I say, we're committed to providing as much help and advice and finding housing solutions for veterans as quickly as we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrow.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who hasn't asked a question, got a question? No. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 5, which is the Housing Revenue Account Capital Plan 2020 to 2025. Any questions on that report? Councillor Braze?
Yes, thanks, Convener. I had a question regarding the table number 1 on page 53.
Okay, fire away.
Just get it up here. Yes, we have in that table, we have in the provisional capital budget, we have quite a large figure for miscellaneous of £970,000, and then there's been a big movement on that proposed final capital budget of £1.223 million. I'm assuming some of that's smoke alarm work. Am I correct in that? And also just a wee flavour of what else might be included in that miscellaneous figure.
Okay, thank you. We'll not assume, we'll ask Mr. Morrow to give us some details to that, please.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Braze. Yeah, you're quite right that there has been some significant movement in the miscellaneous, and that is because you quite rightly say that part of that budget is used to fund the installation of smoke alarms. The new legislation for extended smoke alarms covering a larger proportion of each property in the social housing sector has meant that we've had to do some quite significant work in that area. So of that revised budget of 1.223 million, 750,000 is to be spent on smoke alarms, and that's to provide, as I say, an extended system covering the majority of the house, including heat detectors in the kitchen and so on. We're trying to achieve that programme by March, and that's why we've accelerated the programme of expenditure. The other areas of the miscellaneous budget covers are things like resurfacing and improvements to garage sites.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Devine, I think you're next.
Thanks, Convener. My question's on page 56. Energy savings and towards zero carbon. Now, this, of course, as we all know, is going to cost huge amounts of money. And I've been on a couple of COP26 webinars recently where we were told that there are actually keen to invest in net zero proposals, but it's going to mean that people work together as councils or even maybe as a whole country. And I was wondering just how much thought had been given to that. This is a big strategic thinking that has to go on. I just on the road we were on that one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Morrow, do you want to take that one, or Mr. Cochrane?
I'm happy to come in there, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Devine. You're quite right that working towards zero carbon by 2045 is one of our major priorities. And a huge proportion of our capital plan is going to be devoted to achieving that in the next 25 years or 24 years, and probably thereafter as well. At the moment, in terms of the capital plan, as you quite rightly say, we have energy saving towards zero carbon, but we also have heating replacement monies as well. What we envisage is that to achieve zero carbon for all of our over 7,000 houses, is that we will be gearing up to spend in the order of £250 million over the next 25 years. And so that obviously a significant part of the capital plan is going to be needed to achieve that. What that means is that we would have to, as we're prioritising that, other parts of our programmes may have to take a sort of a second place in terms of priorities. We hope to still carry on delivering new build houses as part of that mix, if you like, within the capital plan. But clearly, one of our major priorities is to making sure that our existing tenants in our existing houses have thermally efficient properties that reduce their fuel bills, and we achieve that zero carbon to contribute to climate change at the same time. So we are putting a lot of thought towards it, and over the course of the next year, what we're intending to do is put a firmer plan together just specifically about achieving net zero, and we'll bring that to members in due course if that would be something that you would like to see.
Okay, thank you very
Yes,
much.
definitely, but I did ask about the kind of grander scheme of things. Are you in consultation with any other local authorities or the Scottish Government, in fact, about this outside investment that could be coming in?
Of regular discussions with the Scottish Government, both at a local level and through our ALACHO, which is the Local Authority Chief Housing Officers organisation. And the discussion there is clearly about trying to achieve that balance between investing in new housing to try and reduce the pressure on access to affordable housing, and, as I say, putting sufficient resources towards the zero carbon. We're fortunate that we have a substantial rental income from our tenants who are able to, take care of our own stock, probably from within our own resources, and that does mean that we'll use our rental income, but we also use borrowing, and you'll see in the capital plan that sets out a kind of a proportion of how that works. The level of borrowing that we have to do is probably less than some others, and we're fortunate in that, and then we have a very efficient housing revenue account, and we're able to do that. In terms of our partners, other local authorities will have similar capital plans. Some will differ from ours in terms of the scale because they have more houses, and that means they have to take on more borrowing. There are impacts from that, as I say, and the discussion with the Scottish Government is how we manage that, and at the same time continue the commitment to delivering the new housing. And I know the government are looking at the level of grant funding they give to councils to help us achieve that, and that's very welcome. And I'm sure the Cabinet Minister will be announcing something on that in the next few months.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Proctor, I think you're next.
Thank you, Councillor Simon, convener. Just a very small pedantic question, maybe on page 58, Mr. Morrow. I see when we've got the sort of spend, and we've got down listed Kirriemuir, but actually it should read Kirriemuir and Dean, because the affordable housing was actually built in, all happened in New Tile, and that might give the people of Kirriemuir town itself the wrong impression, and that might be similar with Monyfeith, which is Monyfeith and Sidlaw. Is that just abandoned for the sort of housing area, but maybe easier and more discernible if it was, put down as the actual ward, i.e. Kirriemuir and Dean?
Is that possible, Mr. Morrow, or is there a specific reason for just having the major locality town name, I presume?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, Councillor Proctor, I'm sure that's entirely possible. It's really shorthand, I think, in terms of just describing as Kirriemuir, but you're quite right. It describes the whole area, and I'm quite happy to do that, give a bit more clarity, because we don't want people to feel that they're not included in our plans. So we'll certainly take care of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrow. Thank you, convener.
Councillor Speed, I think you're next.
Yeah, thanks, convener. It was in relation to table 1 and the reduction in spend for sheltered housing, and just a bit of clarity and explanation with regards to that as to why that would be.
Mr. Morrow. please.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we've reduced the expenditure in sheltered housing is we conducted a number of surveys with our tenants in sheltered housing to ask them about what kind of improvements they would like to see to their facilities. Not as many proposals came forward as we expected, so clearly we have to prioritise our resources to where they're most needed, and one of those areas, as we just described, is in terms of energy saving and trying to achieve zero carbon, as well as delivering new build. That may change if we have more suggestions from our shelter tenants. Certainly, one of the exercises we want to do in the next few months is to go out again to our shelter customers and ask for their opinions on current facilities, and if there are things that they would like to see in terms of capital improvements. So if we have those suggestions put forward, we can then articulate those in the form of a project, and then allocate resources as required. So that's the reason.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Morrow. Thanks,
Convener, just to assist Mr. Morrow, it's Mr. Balfour here.
Yes, yeah, there you go.
We do have an additional 380,000 being spent in sheltered housing this year on heating upgrades. That's in the heating tab. So that,
okay, thanks, Mr. Balfour.
That's good news. Councillor Moore, I think you're next.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, it's also in Table 1. We've just been hearing about the energy saving and towards zero carbon, but I notice in Table 1 that the final capital budget figure, it has reduced from the provisional capital budget, and this happened again last year. And I'm just wondering how we're going to achieve the energy saving and towards zero carbon if we're going to keep cutting the budget.
I don't think this is the final figure, but I shall let Mr. Morrow address that.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I think there are probably, I don't like to do it, but there are special circumstances, obviously, at the moment with the pandemic, and that has affected how we've been able to deliver some of the work that we would like to undertake. So it has restricted in the last year and a half, I suppose, which operations we could do, and that has impacted on the amount of expenditure in the budget. You're quite right, Councillor Moore, that if we're to hit the zero carbon targets, we need to increase that expenditure, and that's what we're intending to do over the course of the next 5 years and beyond that. So you'll see that figure will rise, and as my colleague Mr. Balfour has pointed out, the heating installation monies that we expend as well are going to be used to install more renewable types of heating. So both of those pots really are combined in terms of how we're going to achieve zero carbon. But you're quite right, it has reduced over the very short term, and that's as a result of, as I say, being restricted in what we could do in the last year or so. And that is changing now. So looking ahead, as I say, that budget's going to increase year on year.
Thank you. Mr. Balfour, did you want to come back in and?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Just to assist Mr. Morrow with the East contract is one that's going very, very well. You'll see quite a lot of external installation projects happening across the county. Spend is looking good. This paper was prepared earlier. I was checking on it today. So yeah, I'm quite confident that we can possibly accelerate some of that spend over the year.
That's good news. That's very helpful. Thank you. Councillor McMillan Douglas, I think you're next.
Yep, thank you very much, Convener. I'd like to ask, I'm not sure if it's Mr. Morrow or Mr. Balfour, I'm sure they'll choose amongst themselves, but in meeting our greenhouse gas objectives, are we putting sufficient emphasis onto solar panels on houses? Because this is clearly so much more an economic way of meeting the objectives, rather than the very high cost of retrofitting energy conservation. Any small window, as you will know, which is replaced in a totally energy efficient way, will cost something between £3,000 and £5,000. Solar panels don't produce extra or wasted energy and become self-sufficient in its own energy. So I policy on that was.
Okay, Mr. Balfour, do you want to address that, please?
Convener. Yeah, solar panels is definitely something that is part of our plans. We've been installing them for a number of years. The latest technology involves battery storage. That's becoming more and more affordable, and the size of the batteries are becoming more manageable. The project that I mentioned earlier, the sheltered housing schemes with heating, that does include solar panels, and we're also going to be piloting battery storage in those as well. So yeah, very much part of our plans.
Okay.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. Where are we? Councillor Durno, I think, is next. Councillor Moore, I take it that's an old hand you've got up. That's it. Thank you. Councillor Durno, please.
Thanks, Convener. Just a quick question. With the problem getting supplies at the moment, I've actually got a client that is waiting on window frames. They've been waiting since last April, and my housing officer has said they're having great difficulty getting the wood and the window frames. And I just wondered if there is an opportunity for us to go outside Excel to buy from maybe another source, another country, so that we can get some of this stock in, because obviously, you mean we can't wait forever for stock, but if we have to go through Excel, then they might not be able to get any stock from anywhere. So I just wondered if there's any opportunity that we could buy from somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Morrow or Mr. Balfour, who's best, or Mr. Cochrane, who wants to take that one?
I'm happy to take that one, Convener.
Thank you.
Councillor, if you can let us know the particular address and after the meeting of this, because I'm not aware of any procurement issues with our window contracts at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Durno, can you speak to Mr. Balfour?
I'll do that. I just thought it was across the board, and it wasn't just a specific one issue that I had. The way that the letter was, constructed, it was like it was a major problem getting window frames. Okay, I'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morrow, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it was really on the, and just to add to Councillor Durno, I think we don't have to use Excel, and we tend to use the Excel procurement framework as best practice, but that doesn't mean that we don't have other tendering opportunities, and we would always explore those if the contracts are not delivering exactly what you need. But as you'll have seen in the report, it's quite right that there are difficulties in getting some components and some raw materials, and there's also some difficulties with staff retention in some contract areas. So to reassure you, we are between ourselves and housing and Mr. Balfour and Mr. Cochrane's team and assets looking at how we procure contracts and how we deliver for the best for our customers. Convener, if indulge me just to come back on Councillor Macmillan Douglas's point, just on one issue. As Ms. Balfour said, we are and have been for a long time installing photovoltaic panels in our properties, but we do that in tandem with increasing the energy efficiency of the properties. It is important that we refurbish our properties with external or internal insulation, because the default position is always to reduce heating demand and fuel use first, and obviously PV is then a way of delivering electricity to be used within the household or within the heating system. But the energy efficiency of the thermal efficiency of the house is always probably the most important thing to get right in the first place, and that will form the core part of our strategy in terms of meeting zero carbon in the next 25 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else got a question? Let's not ask the question. No, any comments? No comments. Good. Okay, so if we can just agree that report. Great. Thank you much. And move on to number 6, which is the Housing Services Performance Update Annual Assurance Statement. Any questions on this one? Councillor Cheap, you're first, then Councillor Devine.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. The only one I have
was I found the actual appendix housing MT update report very hard to read. I don't know if anybody else found with this, but I found it, I just couldn't really get my head around it, the way it was pulled together. But regardless, my question really is probably for Mr. Morrow, is on page 83, which is a table standing on its own. If I can just find it again. Yeah, and it seems to refer to various streets and accommodation with voids, a number of voids. But it's just purely on one, the only one in there that for Carnoustie that I can see is Lowson Park. And bearing in mind there's always a waiting list for Lowson Park, can maybe explain that, why there's 6 voids down against that, unless I'm misunderstanding how this is pulled together, because I see that it's not very well put together. We don't understand. I really don't understand what it's saying. So could you maybe explain that table first, Mr. Morrow, and then explain to me why we have voids in Lowson Park?
Yeah, I myself and the Vice Convener raised this at pre-agenda, and I can't actually remember what the answer was. So we'll let Mr. Morrow address that.
Yeah, I can't remember the answer either, Convener, because I wasn't there.
Oh, well.
Can I get back to you after the meeting, Councillor Cheap? Because you're quite right. I think probably one of the things we need to address in this report in future is to give better context to the different sections, because you're quite right. What it's designed to do is provide a huge amount of background information that give assurance in terms of the governance of what we're doing in terms of the housing service. And I do agree that this particular report sits in isolation and it doesn't have a description. So when you're seeing it cold, it doesn't provide really anything meaningful. The Lowson Park, as I say, doesn't have many voids, and I think what this is showing is that there's probably been a number of voids over a period of time. And it's really capturing the changes of tenancy that have happened. So, but what I'll do is I'll get clarity on that for you if you're happy with that, and get back to you. And I think certainly the next time this report comes to committee, we need to articulate it better and give context to the different sections. So apologies for that.
Can you maybe copy all committee members into that, Mr. Morrow, just so we're all clear on the context of this?
Yep, we'll do.
Councillor Devine, I think you're next.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I've got just a couple of questions. One on page 76. It's to do with the percentage of repairs completed first time. And we're well under the Scottish average on this. And, these are the ones that come to us. These are the cases that come to the councillors, the ones who have had the kitchen repair or done, but not done well enough. They've put up with a lot of problems when they've had a bathroom or their kitchen replaced, but it's not been done well enough. And I mean, we did have this kind of thing saying, do it, what was it now? Do it well and do it first time. So I just wondered why this is not really happening. Are our contractors not being checked up on enough, or maybe you could just explain to me, please, because it is very irksome.
Which officer would like to take this?
I'll have a go, Convener. If you're again, Councillor Devine, you're right that our ambition is always for our repairs to be done first time, so that the customer contacts us, we instruct the contractor. The contractor has the right instruction and the right materials when they arrive at the property, and they complete the repair in that one operation. We have seen over the course of actually a bit of a time, actually, some contractors not able to deliver that for us. Now, there's a number of parts in the process that I think we need to improve on. One is enabling our customers to more easily give an accurate description. And then obviously we have to make sure that that is interpreted into an instruction that's clear and accurate for the contractor. Then we rely on the contractor to have the materials and the components within their van or however they get to the property, and have the time allocated to be able to do undertake the repair. We agree that it's not good enough, and it's an area that we need to improve on. There is different performance levels between contractors, and quite frankly, some of our own staff are more experienced than others in giving instructions. That also goes for customers, and sometimes customers and quite rightly, they would say that it's not their problem to be able to describe a repair, and that would be up to us to inspect it where necessary, and we try and do that. We do also monitor contractors as well, monitor their performance, and we carry out post inspections. So all of those processes are in place, and what I think is that we haven't got it quite right yet, and that's an area of improvement that we need to achieve in the course of the next year. I think my colleague, Mr. Balfour, probably wants to
I'm going to ask
say something.
Mr. Balfour, because I'm aware, Mr. Morrow, you want that pre-agenda. Myself and the Vice Convener raised this exact same question, and I think Mr. Balfour was the officer that addressed it, so maybe he can give us some detail.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and through yourself. I think we need to remember this is last year's performance, and what we've done this year is we have new contracts in place where, rather than have a lot of individual trade contracts, one contractor now takes responsibility for all that trade. So if you can think of previously, we might have sent the wrong contractor, and then it had to be reverted to a different trade. Now, because we have what we call a multi-trade contract, we're more likely to get the right person there at the right time. And in addition to that, we've also set up within our access line a team to deal directly with housing repairs. And as Mr. Morrow talked about, that's about getting the correct diagnosis at the time. So hopefully we can see an improvement of that over the coming year. Thanks.
Good. That would be good. Can I just ask my question was just on page 81.
No, it's one question. One question.
I did say I had 2 questions.
Yeah, sorry, it's just one question each. So if we move on to Councillor Speed, please.
Thanks, Convener. So this is just one question again on this
Correct.
report.
That's the process, yeah. What's your question, please, Councillor Speed?
Okay, thank you, Convener. I shall just change my pages. Surprised to see the 100% antisocial behaviour cases that have been resolved. Of course, that's welcome, but I just wondered if there was just a little bit of clarity around how they become resolved, who actually takes the lead, because I certainly have a number of live cases unresolved, and there seems to be a lack of clarity as to who takes the lead with that, who their point of contact is when they're having a problem. Is it housing? Is it the police? Is it the anti-social behaviour team? And what is the average time for reaching a resolve?
Okay, that's 3 in a row. We raised that at pre-agenda as well. The Vice Convener raised that, but I'll let officers pick that one up.
Thanks, Convener. Firstly, I think, so I was trying to get your questions in order, Councillor Speed. There is 100%, and that we have had a very high level of achieving close to 100% response on antisocial behaviour and over a number of years. There's not really a time scale, because, as you know, some of the issues that we experience in terms of antisocial behaviour are experienced for a while. We take some action, there's some activity, and then that activity stops, but then it resurrects itself. So it's quite difficult to put a time scale on when cases are resolved. But usually, if there's a period of some time where nothing has happened, that's when a case is seen as being resolved and hopefully resolved in a positive way. In terms of being a point of contact, if it's an antisocial behaviour issue around a property, whether that's a council property or a housing association property or a private sector property, certainly our community investigation team within our, in terms of antisocial behaviour, and our housing team can be the point of contact. There is a difference between antisocial behaviour that's criminal activity, not related to houses, and antisocial behaviour that happens around houses. And when it's criminal activity that's not related to housing, then that would be the police that would be the point of contact. But obviously, we work together with our police colleagues as much as we can on both those cases that are not related to housing, and those cases that are. Did I address your question, or sorry, did you have another one?
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, you weren't able to give the average time because of the complexities, and that obviously each case can be.
I think that's right.
Is there a target time?
No, there isn't, because there's initial contact periods and there's various timescales. One of the reasons that the housing regulator has looked at this performance figure is that the timescales didn't really add anything meaningful to monitoring the performance of different housing providers, because, as I say, cases come and go and can be dormant, if you like, for some time before they correct themselves. So it's a difficult one to pin down, I think, and that's the reason at the time that there is no sort of average time scale.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart, I think you're next.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I was going to go back to Councillor Cheap's question regarding the voids. My recollection of the information we got was it had a lot to do with kitchen replacements and bathroom replacements in the voids, where they would possibly do that before tenants would be allocated. That was just to save the tenants having to go out, during the tenancy, if they could do it all beforehand if it was required. My question was regarding kitchen replacements. I've been told that some of the firms that we used to provide the kitchens, the ranges that they provide become obsolete after just a few years, and it's very difficult to get parts for replacement parts for kitchens in our properties, and it's then leaving some of the tenants with units that don't match what's already in there. Is there any way that we can deal with that, address that, with the companies, where they can maybe have the range available for us for maybe, say, 10 or 20 years or something?
Mr. Balfour.
Yeah, thank you, convener, and through yourself. We don't specify individual manufacturers. What we have is a performance specification. So it would be very hard to work with an individual supplier. The procurement regulations don't allow us to specify that individual supplier. So, yeah, suppliers change their ranges, on I don't know how often, but certainly regularly, and that's to maintain. So that would be a difficult one, but I'm happy to look into it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor MacDonald, I think you're next.
Afternoon. Just looking at page 81, and we've got the appendix, I think it's appendix 3, the Housing MT Update Report. There's figures for March 2018, 19, April 19 and May 2019. And we don't have figures for June 2019. They're just down as sort of question marks. I'm just wondering if we've got those figures, or is there a reason we don't have them?
Mr. Morrow, would you like to take that one? Page, what did we say, 81?
And thanks.
Same for the gross rent arrears underneath. As I flick down, so it's the same situation.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, for pointing that out. We do have figures for those periods. And I think that
have them emailed out to all of us then. Once
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think they're just missing off of that particular report. And what's happened is that because they were missing in that particular report at that time, we've incorporated the report into the overall information in this committee report, and it's obviously missing. So we'll find that information and forward it out to councillors after the committee.
Fantastic, thank you. Anybody else got a question? It's not spoken. No, any comments? No. Just flick back to the recommendations then. Are the recommendations agreed on this report? Oh, sorry, Councillor Speed, have you got a comment?
Yeah, sorry, convener. I don't know if you didn't catch my hand there. It was just regards to the tenant satisfaction performance report on the table. And just to say that I was kind of again surprised to see such an tenant satisfaction over the period between 1920 and 2021, given that participation opportunities would have been really limited.
Okay,
so
I think you've already asked the question. Since you've asked the question, we'll get Mr. Morrow to address the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and thanks, Councillor Speed, for raising the customer satisfaction, because I think it does show that despite the very difficult circumstances that our teams have experienced over the course of the pandemic, as every other public service has, that we're particularly pleased with the improvement in customer satisfaction. And areas that I think we're particularly proud of is that we obviously 86% of our tenants believe that we offer good value for money. 88% are satisfied with our overall service, and as you say, the one that has that really has improved is the opportunities for our customers to participate, and that's gone from somewhere in the order of under 70% to 93% are happy with those opportunities. So when we conducted the customer satisfaction survey, over 1,000 people were spoken to by independent researchers. So the information we have from our customers, we think, is quite robust. Opportunities to participate are not always in a formal situation in terms of the tenant steering group or taking part in a particular panel. Very often it can be the opportunity to speak to our housing officers. And one of the things that we're particularly keen on is for our housing officers to be able to spend time with our tenants within their own homes, because what that does is it establishes a good working relationship, and it instills trust and confidence between the customer and our housing officer. And once we establish that trust and confidence, tenants were able to easily describe what kind of services they want and how they should be delivered. Now, we interpret that as participation, because obviously we're able to take that information and then try and build that customer intelligence, if you like, into the way that we deliver our services. And I think that has borne out in the way that our customers have expressed that in the satisfaction that they do have with our service. One of the reasons it's particularly important to give people the opportunity to participate in that more informal way is that can form the bedrock for a lot of our prevention activities. And one of the things that our housing team are particularly good at is preventing crises occurring, which would have a knock-on impact in terms of resource impacts on other services. So through that kind of informal sharing of information between our officers and customers, it means that we might be able to bring in mediation. We might be able to stop family breakdowns and relationship breakdowns, which are often the root cause of homelessness. And it means we might also be able to refer customers to mental health services and to other services that can help with some of the complex problems that families encounter. So through all of that, what we find is that through our sort of intensive resource in terms of our housing officers working with people in their own homes, it means that we deliver preventative savings in other public agencies, such as acute care in hospital, for instance, or families and children, or indeed with the police. So the work that we do is an important part of that kind of collaborative community approach. And all of that can form a kind of a participation, I think, in the way that we deliver our services, and that's probably why you've seen that huge increase in the way that customers are satisfied with our approach.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got to the agreeing the recommendations there. So, Councillor Durno, have you got a comment or a question?
Just a quick comment just to thank the whole of the housing team that I work with in Arbroath, because they've been really helpful. They've had to work through COVID in really bad circumstances, and they're always the first to come back to you and let you know what's happening, and we've been able to get back to our constituents to let them know. So I just want to thank them and the team for all the work they've done this year. Okay, thank you.
I'll echo that thank you as well. Okay, so I think we're going back to recommendations. So are these recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, so if we move on to report number 7, which is the Angus Local Access Forum Function and Membership. Now, from memory, I might be wrong, but I see your hand going up. I think Councillor Devine did ask for clarification at a previous meeting about the sort of remit of this and its membership. So that's the reason this report is here today. So I think you'll have a question, Councillor Devine.
Well, yes, but it's also a thank you. Thank you for bringing this and getting a bit more detail about what this is about. I just wondered, how often do they meet? Do they meet on a regular basis, or do they just meet when there's a particular situation arises? We did ask for a look at minutes, and perhaps if a councillor was, for interest's sake, would that be possible? That was my question there.
Okay, thank you. Now, it's written by Alison Smith, so I'm not sure if Alison's going to answer that question, but we'll ask her to see if she can answer it for us, please.
I will try and answer that, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that you did ask both about attendance and about minutes, etc. You'll note in the report, and we're also recommending, we've got a change of officer representation, so that's just due to some structural changes within the team, etc. And the forum do meet regularly. However, obviously, again, have been impacted, but that's something I've picked up with the team, with the new contact that we'll have about making sure that minutes are readily available, and also asking the question about attendance or sitting in on a meeting. So I'll come back to everybody about that one.
Okay, thank you. Brilliant. Councillor Duff, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I just wanted to ask a little bit about the work of the committee. I mean, it's not an area that I've had a lot of constituent queries about, but I did have one recently which related to an attempt by a fishing enterprise to close access to the pass round about the North Esk. And I contacted Mr. Clark, who helpfully put me in touch with his opposite number in Aberdeenshire, who, from what I can see, has addressed the issue pretty quickly, and the gate that was locked is now open so that the public can access the path. But I just wondered, do we get a lot of issues that are dealt with by this committee or not? I'm not really, apart from my one example from the last 5 or 6 years, I'm not really cited on there being a lot of issues, but just interested to know.
Okay, Mrs. Smith, do you want to take that one?
I can try and answer that. I can't comment on the sort of level of detail. I think what's clear from the discussions we've had previously and at this meeting is perhaps more awareness of the forum and their activities would be good. So not only just having the minutes online, I think if we could ask them to look at different ways of sharing, in terms of what they're dealing with and the outcome of some of these issues, etc., would be good. So it's certainly something I'll pick up with our officer and come back with some maybe recommendations about how we can share a bit more information about the actual activities of the forum.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else got a question? No. Anybody got a comment? No. Okay, are we happy to agree the recommendations 1 to 3?
Agreed.
Brilliant.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So if we move on to report number 8, which is the Parks and Burial Grounds Plant and Equipment Replacement Programme 21-22. Any questions on this? No questions? Any comments on it? No. Can we agree the recommendations then again 1 to 3 if that's everybody happy?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to the update of the waste and recycling policy, which is agenda number 9, which I'd like to just say a few words on first of all. So I obviously welcome the report and thank council officers for the positive changes contained in it. But I am going to focus on one major positive change, which is in section 4.1. I don't normally like to say aye, but I'm going to say aye here. So I've been working with the officers for many months to encourage the option of an additional grey recycling bin to be made available to the households who are super recyclers and need additional capacity to maximise their recycling. Today's recommendation for me is a game changer in how this council supports households in their curbside recycling. This will mean less vehicle journeys to recycling centres, which can only mean less car journeys overall and obviously reduce CO2 emissions. With COP26 in Glasgow later this year, Angus Council is sending out a signal today that recycling is more important than ever. Angus Council is already the second best recycling council in Scotland, and this change will go a long way to move us towards being the #1 in Scotland, an ambition we should all be aiming for. While this council provides the mechanics to allow our citizens to recycle, it's all down to Angus residents for embracing and accepting the need to recycle. Therefore, a massive thank you to the Angus residents who recycle day in and day out, and they helped make the County of Angus the second best recycling council in Scotland. Thank you. Is there any questions on this report? Councillor Brace.
Yes, well, thanks, convener, and yes, I think this is a big step forward, making additional grey bins available to people who for all the reasons you stated. I do have a question. It's on the table at 1.1 and on 128, page 128, regarding food waste, and I've heard people say that they would like to get a food caddy, but they don't live in a village, but the wee truck goes past between villages and right past their door, and they don't get their they don't get access to this part of the recycling project. So I just wondered if officers could give me a wee bit of information, a wee bit of clarity on how they decide who gets a food waste bin in these situations.
Okay, I think we have a policy on this, but I shall ask whichever officer feels they want to address that to do so, please.
Chair, I think I could answer that question.
Mr. Daly, on you go.
The council has a legal requirement to provide food collections to households in urban areas, and that translates our legal requirement is provide a food service to essentially our 7 main towns. We actually go beyond the legal requirement, as we also provide it to our villages as well. It was previously agreed and defined that we would provide the food service to towns and villages only, and that was a policy that was agreed. We've therefore designed our collection runs around that, and the capacity in terms of the vehicles can only hold so much and can only collect so many food caddies in a day, are designed around that capacity to service the towns and villages. You are correct that, travelling between towns, travelling between villages, they will pass households who are not on the service. But in terms of operationally, when we have designed the service with the capacity to service towns and villages only.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I think Councillor Devine, you were next.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Just a very short question for Mr. Daly, probably. At 3.4 on page 129, we've got this: bins should be retrieved as soon as possible. Now, there are some persistent people who don't take their bins in, even although they have places to put them. I just wondered what powers we do have to do that. I know that people, staff members do speak to them, but sometimes they still do that. So I wondered if there was any further powers that we have.
Okay, Mr. Daly.
Yes, the legislation was amended relatively recently, and that is actually, we can enforce in terms of a legal requirement to return your bin after collection. However, we do not have the power to issue a fixed penalty notice, as we do, for example, littering or say fly tipping, for example. So it is maybe not as straightforward to take enforcement action as the examples I just gave, but it's always the case that is really the last resort, and we'll try and work with the landlords and tenants to try and resolve the case. And I do know that there are difficult locations, but on the whole we tend to have some success which sometimes then relapses, and then we need to come back and communicate. But as I said, yes, there is legal powers, but not to take fixed penalty notices. But as I said, our preference is to just engage with the tenants and the landlords.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore, I think you're next.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I'm just interested with, this is going to obviously have an impact. Have you any idea how many extra grey bins are likely to be requested?
Probably pass that to Mr. Daly.
I think what we can base it on is the number of requests we have received that we've declined in the past, and it isn't, obviously it's difficult to come up with an accurate estimate, but we have not had a large amount of requests because we always encourage people, and it's in the report, that they should flat pack and compact and squash their recycling, and I would really highlight that, the importance of doing that, and it really makes a huge difference, you know, putting a cardboard, you know, a box in the bin compared with flat pack. So provided I think we encourage people to continue to do that, I do not think it will be a huge number, but we do feel that it's manageable just based on the number of requests we've previously received and declined.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Thank you, convener. My question is very much linked to Councillor Moore's. Firstly, I on this modernisation of the policy and congratulate you, convener, your vice convener and officers on the hugely successful recycling policy that we have in Angus. It really is an exemplar and quite marvellous. The issue about more grey bins is something which Councillor Proctor and I have been going on about, and you've been very receptive about, and hence this policy. I was also interested to ask Mr. Daly what the additional cost of grey bins would be. In the paper, you say the cost of recycling. I'm sorry, the cost of additional bins will most certainly be offset by the savings from additional recycling. I think I understand exactly what you're saying there, but could you just sentence a little bit clearer for me?
Okay, Mr. Daly.
I'll certainly try. Yes, it's there's a significant difference between the cost for sending waste for disposal as mixed residual general waste, which goes to a waste energy plant at Baldovie Dundee, compared with recycling. So the gate fee, there is a significant disparity, and it is financially beneficial for us to collect the waste as recycling. And apart from the environmental reasons for recycling, really there's a strong financial incentive as well for us to encourage people to do the right thing and recycle. So the basis of this is that, as I've already said, we can't put an exact figure on how many bins will be delivered. However, we anticipate that this will be associated with a diversion of waste from the more expensive option of going as general waste to going to a separate destination for recycling, which will be, I hope, a net saving, and hence the sentence that was included into the report.
Very clear. Thank you very much, Convener.
Councillor Proctor, I think you're next.
Hi, convener. My actual question is very much the same as Councillor McMillan Douglas, and it's been answered fully by Mr. Daly. If I could just, if I'm allowed to offer just a very quick comment.
Can we just find out first if Councillor Cheeps has a question or a comment? And then
well, I'll come back for my comment.
Yeah, I'll hold you that. Don't worry, I'll come back to you. So,
I'll come back for my comment. That's no bother.
Thank you, Councillor Cheap. Is it a question you have?
Yes, it is.
Okay, fire away.
Actually, it's for Mr. Daly, and just a quick one, Graham. I know you know that myself and Councillor MacDonald have been communicating with you on the matter of bins, and also bins being left outside on streets after collection. And just what I was listening to what you're responding to, I think Councillor Devine, I think it was on bins being left out, and we can go down the route right to a fixed penalty notice. Is that the case also for commercial entities as well as individuals?
Just to clarify, what I said was we don't have the option of a fixed penalty notice.
Well, you don't. I'm sorry, I thought you did. We did. All right.
Yes, I'll just clarify. Perhaps it wasn't clear. I gave the example in other instances, such as litter and fly tipping. We do, but the legislation is that there is a legal obligation for someone to return their bin, but we do. It does not give us the powers to issue fixed penalty notices. So that just to clarify that point. But our approach, what I would say is our approach for commercial customers is similar to households, domestic households, and we try and engage. And I have to say, on the whole, we'll find our commercial customers very receptive.
Just if it's a follow up there, Councillor Salmon, if I can for a second, just a logical thing here. If it's a legal obligation, Mr. Daly, but we have no real recourse, I almost think, why is it a legal obligation at all? I know what you're saying, but we haven't really got. We're kind of hoping that people will work with us, but if they fail to work with us, we don't seem to have any recourse, do we?
Chair, will I just answer that?
Yes, please. On you go.
There is with all legal legislation, there is recourse in terms of we can report the matter. And ultimately, I think, again, I qualify this saying I'm not, don't have a legal qualification, but we would go to Procurator Fiscal for consideration. It's just what I would say is it's more challenging for us to take legal action compared with where we have the powers to issue fixed penalty notices. So there's still the option for us to take legal action, but our options are less immediate compared with the other examples I gave.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Speed, is yours a question?
Yeah, is that okay, convener?
Brilliant, fire away.
Yep, thanks. I of course welcome us maximising the opportunity for people to recycle and their capacity to do so in terms of the additional grey bin. But I just wondered how we kind of managed to balance that and kind of send out the right message in terms of, I guess, our kind of part we play in being consumers of plastic waste. And kind of how we compare that to kind of not just our local footprint, but kind of more wider. Obviously, if we're enabling people to fill up their recycling bins more, that's a good thing. But we're still encouraging kind of for them to purchase less plastic, if you like.
Mr. Daly, I'm not sure that's a question you could answer, but if you feel you want to, fire away.
I think it's a good observation, in my opinion, is that, and you're correct, is something we need to balance, is that in terms of reducing the amount of waste we produce in the first place, it's quite a big question for us to tackle on our own, because a lot of it's linked to the design of product packaging. And I think that it's just getting that balance. We're aware of it's not just plastic, there's a lot more cardboard we're seeing and that we're collecting. So we are working with organisations such as Zero Waste Scotland, and trying to push that agenda. But it is just trying to get the balance correct, and we feel that the recommendation we're putting forward in terms of the changes, I think, hopefully strikes a fair balance.
Thanks, Mr. Daly.
Thank you. I think a lot of the packaging is really caused by the increase in online shopping and the way that the packaging is mainly in cardboard.
Yeah.
But Councillor Durno.
I just got a wee comment if somebody wants some more questions.
We'll just see if anybody else has got any questions that's not already asked the question. No. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll take Councillor Durno and then we'll go back to the Provost if that's okay. So Brenda,
just a comment that I know we've done really well with our recycling centre, and this is no reflection on Graham Daly at all. We tried a couple of years ago with the recycling paint, but we didn't fully endorse the community repaint scheme. We just did it a trial ourselves, but we didn't have the facilities for storing the paint outside, and it was getting rusty cans, etc. We didn't have the facilities at our sites to do it properly. And I wish this is something that we could maybe take up in the future, because I think there's only a couple of councils in the whole of Scotland that are not involved in the community repaint scheme. And over the UK, I'll just quickly say, 50 million litres of paint, enough to fill 22 Olympic swimming pools, is thrown away every year. So if we could get into that, but we do actually have to pay a fee for it. And I think this is something that maybe the administration didn't want to pay a fee for it, but I really think it's something we should do, because the shops might be short of supplies. And if we can join the community repaint scheme, I think it would be really valuable for us. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that's an unfair comment about the administration, but we'll let that go. Mr. Daly, would you like to address that point, please?
Yeah, I think that I recall, I think two attempts we've had to engage a partner in the one Councillor Durno just referred to, but I think going back a few years there was another attempt, and it didn't work out for several reasons, which probably maybe getting into too much detail about that here. I mean, definitely willing to discuss it further with Councillor Durno with the meeting. I would just say that not just paint, but we're constantly looking at opportunities. But coming back to balance, we have to get balance something that's sustainable, that we can sustain, and that is, economical as well. And it is just getting those balances. And we've been successful in introducing a range of different recycling initiatives, but we've certainly not given up on paint, and we'll do everything we can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Daly. Right, back to Councillor Proctor now.
Thanks very much, convener. I just want to say that I think the report's great. I think the success of recycling in Angus, we're the second best in Scotland, has been said before. And one sort of small comment I'd like to make. One of my constituents complained to me that her green bin, the lid had been damaged. I reported that on, and within a day the thing was replaced, and I got a very nice thank you email back, praising the council staff for it. So Mr. Daly, you and your team, you do a first class job, and we're very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Yes, it is a welcome report. The extension of the grey bins is very, very welcome. And I looked back, and we used to have green waste bins, food waste bins, all the way across the county, and that was actually withdrawn in January 2017, when there was a decision to cut back on the number of properties that actually got them. But this report is very positive. We're second best in Scotland. We should be aiming to be the best. And I think that this will help us to achieve it. On the matter of the paint, yes, I've got loads of paint and varnish left by the previous people who were in this house 10 years ago. And I'd love to have an outlet to take it to, but unfortunately at the moment we haven't got one. But I would wholeheartedly suggest that it's looked at.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Yeah, I'm happy to look at that. I'm aware that Councillor Durno and myself are having a meeting in the near future with Mr. Daly, so we can probably touch on paint as well as the other subjects that we're going to touch on. So, okay, is there anybody else have any further comments? No. Okay, can we go back to the recommendations then? Are we happy to agree the recommendation?
Great.
So if we move on to report number 10, which is the, excuse me, Afghan relocation scheme. Is there any questions on this one? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, convener. I do want to welcome this report. I'm really, really pleased that these who have served us so well, and especially when we can see that the Syrian refugees have been, they've settled in really, really well. I know that, there's going to be a struggle here. It says in 5.2, I think there's inevitable impact on staff resources, and I just wondered if you felt that there was any chance that the government, Westminster government, could be understanding this and maybe giving a bit of extra money to councils to take this forward.
Okay, I'm going to ask if he's on the call, the Deputy Chief Executive. I know he's going to head this up. He may have some information. I certainly haven't been involved in the negotiations with the different governments. Is Mr. Ara?
Sorry, apologies, Convener. I was on the phone to the hospital there. Could you just repeat the question?
Sorry, Councillor Devine was asking whether we've had discussions either with, well, she was asking about the UK government, but I'll say both governments, about funding to help the council with any staffing issues in dealing with this relocation of the Afghan refugees.
Yeah, well, certainly both at UK level and through COSLA at Scottish Government level, there's been significant conversations about the capacity to support these individuals, and the discussions we've had to date have obviously been also in a core Ministry of Defence in terms of the provision of accommodation. In terms of the unknown costs, I guess that's something that will have to be kind of worked through over the coming kind of months and years, because until the individuals are in our communities, it's very hard to know what levels of support or input they would require to enable us to enable them to integrate fully. So that will be an ongoing conversation, both at Scottish and UK level, I would anticipate.
Okay, I see Mr. Morrow's got his hand up, so he may have some additional information. Mr. Morrow.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And on just building on what Deputy Chief Executive has said, there is grant funding available from the UK government, and that should be sufficient to provide funding for the wraparound support that we'll provide for the families as they're here over a period of months, and it's designed to do that over a period of months. The difficulty often with using that resource is that inevitably, although we were fortunate to have experienced staff, Councillor has rightly said, that are experienced with the Syrian refugees, because they are experienced and the team is experienced, we then draw on their skills and their experience in providing, the resource for this new group of families. So inevitably, the workload does fall on them. So the way that we try and address that is to use the funding available to cover those costs, and where we can backfill some of the activities, so that they don't build up a backlog of just additional tasks falling to the same people all the time. As you'll know, though, that's not always easy, because sometimes it's difficult to backfill tasks over a temporary short-term period, and there is a shortage in some areas of experienced staff or people that can take on the skills relatively quickly. But the grant funding that is available, we think is certainly adequate, and the way that we're planning the response in delivering the programme for the families is to make sure that it's generally contained within the resource of that grant, and that covers things like adult services, children and families, and some additional school support, because clearly some of the children from the families will go to particular schools. So we use the funding to provide an additional resource in those specific schools. Some of the areas that are a bit of an unknown, though, are obviously in terms of health, because different families that come to us have different health needs, and so there are potentially additional impacts on the health service, but obviously that's part of the country's commitment to providing a safe and secure home for the people that have helped our coalition forces in Afghanistan.
Okay, hopefully that gives you some comfort, Councillor Devine.
Yes, it is. I was just concerned that staff might be having to do extra work.
Okay, I'm sure we'll
get that's good.
I was going to say, I'm sure we'll get regular updates, I would hope, as things progress. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I was a little bit confused when I read the recommendation that, resettle 10 families of up to 50 individuals. Was that 50 individuals or 500? But the question I've got is, do we know when we're going to start receiving in the families? And has it been worked out whereabouts they're going to go? Will they all be going into urban areas, or will some be going into more rural settlements?
Mr. Morrow, I think there's two approaches here, or there's two different sections to this, but Mr. Morrow can cover that off, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener, and thanks, Councillor Moore. The number, the 10, is 10 families and the reason it's described as up to 50 individuals is that that's the capacity of the homes that we have offered up in terms of being able to accommodate up to 5 individuals in each of the homes. So a maximum of 50 people coming. In terms of the other questions, our intention at the moment in terms of these 10 families is to locate them in a more urban area. I wouldn't be intending to say exactly where, because there are some security aspects of that, obviously, that we don't want to particularly promote exactly in Angus where they will be. But generally, it will be at the moment the 10 would be intended to be accommodated in a more urban area rather than rural. In terms of the other scheme, the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme, it might be that it might be more appropriate to include potential housing solutions in a rural area, depending really on the profile of any families that are offered to us from the Home Office. That second scheme is yet to be fully developed from the Home Office, so we're awaiting some more detail on that. In terms of when the families for the locally employed staff scheme would be allocated to us, we had been expecting to receive families during the course of September and into the early part of October, but we haven't yet. The reason for that is, although we've offered up accommodation provision to the Home Office, as have other providers, the Home Office had started the programme of referring families out to local authorities. That was interrupted by the kind of closing days of the coalition forces pulling out of Afghanistan, and no doubt members will have seen the relatively chaotic scenes at the airport at Kabul. The way that families were evacuated on the flights as quickly as possible back into the UK and other countries has meant that when they arrived in the country, the first priority was to make sure that they were accommodated in quarantine accommodation, because Afghanistan is a red country in terms of COVID. Then they were then moved out of the quarantine accommodation, and hotel accommodation was sourced around the country as best could be provided by the Home Office to try and accommodate the large number of arrivals in the various flights. So that had to be done very quickly. And the families are around the whole of the UK in different places. What that meant was that, again, the priority was to provide that short-term accommodation. Before the Home Office refer the families to local authorities, they are now checking the exact needs of each of the families. And when they have completed that operation, they are restarting the process of referring families to each local authority. In fact, they've started that, we believe, yesterday, which means that we're expecting to have families referred to us probably within the course of the next couple of weeks. But really, that's dependent on how quickly the Home Office's staff can get around all the families and confirm their family details and their particular accommodation needs and any other particular health aspects that they have. So all of that, some of that information will be provided by the Home Office once they have 10 families that they can refer to us, and that will then start the process of welcoming them to Angus.
Okay, thank you. That's very detailed. Does anybody else have any further questions? No. Anybody have a comment? No comments? Okay, so if we go back to the recommendations then, 1 to 3, can we agree the recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, next report is number 11. So let's get it. Okay, number 11 is the management rules for Kepty Park, as they call it, Kepty Pond, Arbroath. Probably go to the Arbroath members on the committee if they've got any questions. I know they were all spoken to as part of the consultation, and all the Arbroath members have supported the proposals. So we'll go to Councillor Durno.
Thanks, convener. They were very detailed. I know that this report is not just going to be for Kepty Pond, it's actually going to council parks. What I do worry about is how are we going to enforce this? Because obviously our community officers are rushed off their feet doing their own work. I mean, if I just don't know how, if somebody's going to do something in a park, I mean, does somebody else have to report it? I don't know how we're going to enforce it. And I suppose we'll just have to go with the flow and see how it works out. But I think it's going to be a difficult one. A lot of these parks are vandalised in the evening. We don't know whether it's children or people that are just vandalising for the sake of vandalising. So specifically, I'm thinking about Freecombe Park, which had a lot of vandalism, and I just don't know how we're going to enforce this unless we're going to have security cameras or something. But I think I'll leave that with the Parks Department to figure out. Thank you.
Okay, which officer would like to address Councillor Durno's question, comments?
I'm going to do
Hi, Chair. I'll try my best.
Okay, thank you, Graham.
I would just to clarify, we do have parks officers, and that would be part of their role, and already is part of their role, to try and engage with users of the park when required. The majority of people, as you well know, use the park responsibly and appreciate the park. You know, we do have issues, and you know, realistically, we'll face challenges and issues going in the future, but our parks officers do our best, and we consult with the community wardens and also with Police Scotland when required to do so. And we're hoping that these rules will be an aid in terms of making it clear that what's the behaviours that are expected of people using the park.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, just a couple of things to highlight. I've flagged up a couple of these to officers, but there's terminology in the report that might be inappropriate now. The use of the word invalid is on page 141, which I don't think is appropriate. I would also like to seek reassurances that we'll use a common sense approach, and that bicycles, which are vehicles, are not somehow put people off from using bikes in our parks. And just a personal opinion, make a comment after this question. I would like to see more encouragement in how we use our parks. So there's a specific mention of, you know, wedding photos not being allowed in parks, and I would like to see us try and encourage as many people into our parks as possible. So things like that, to me, promotes our beautiful spaces. So the last recommendation about saying we're going to put out to consultation that these get interpreted in other parks, if we're doing that, I would like to make sure that we have all that sort of tidied up.
Yeah, that's the point I was about to make, Councillor MacDonald. It is going out for further consultation, so obviously local people plus elected members can feed in as well, I assume, to the consultation, and we can finalise it at the end. But I'm wondering which officer would like to. Mr. Daly, do you want to try and respond, please?
Yep, sure, Chair. In terms of the bicycle, I think the attempt, the wording that we've used was not to include bicycles as being prohibited, but I would clarify that bicycles are not prohibited from our parks, and we have no intention of enforcing any ban of bicycles in the park. Hopefully, the wording does make that clear, but just to clarify, in case it doesn't, that there is no intention to ban bicycles. As you've correctly pointed out, this is subject to further consultation before being applied to the other parts. I think the other comment or query from Councillor MacDonald was regarding the wedding photography. I would just to make clear that we welcome, if not, in fact, we do encourage, wedding park. We actually worked with the registrars. What the report says is that permission is required, and I think it is just trying to manage the situation and make sure this doesn't impede other users of the park and trying to have it in an organised fashion. And I think the rules regarding photography may be more targeted at any large-scale commercial photography that might go on at the park. And again, it's really targeted to make sure that they don't overwhelm the park and don't impact upon the users of the park.
Okay, brilliant. Councillor Cheap, I think you're next.
You're muted, David.
That better, sorry about that. Yeah, just this came up before a year or so ago, and I know Councillor MacDonald mentioned something, and I supported on the terminology and words in this, but I'm just wondering, just twofold. It's 10 pages long, what I'm seeing in front of us. Where are we putting this? Who's going to read it? The wording in there again, we brought this up last time. I know it's got to be almost legislative, but who's going to read this, and how are we going to publicise it? Are we going to put it on all the notice boards in parks? And the second thing is that, just for clarity, I did actually read a lot of the consultation notes that came with this paper, and a lot of people, like myself, are dog owners, and they wanted clarity on keeping dogs, say, either on a leash or to hand or whatever. I just want to be sure absolutely clear, because I get people in the park saying, why is your dog not on a lead? And I'm saying, well, that's what dogs are for, to be actually exercised freely. They need to be exercised freely. Can we make it absolutely clear that that is a condition on this as well? But I think more importantly here is, again, it's 10 pages long. What are we going to do with it?
Mr. Daly, I'm not sure you're the person to answer that question. I can be from our legal department, because I'm sure there are reasons it's 10 pages long. I do accept Councillor Cheap's point about how we do this consultation and how we do display it.
Can I just to maybe just direct you to section 5.2 of the report, which recognises that the rules are quite long, and it says that will be available on the website in a format that's suitable to be communicated. I would also add to that it is more of a reference document to an extent, with sections of it could be put on signage put on display in the parks rather than the full copy of all the rules. And I think having this reference document, for want of a better explanation, it just, as I said, provides the foundation for us to put the signage up. But as said in the report 5.2, it'll be made available on the website and hopefully in a format that's as easily communicated as possible.
Maybe we could just have outside the meeting some clarity on how we're going to actually do this consultation. I think that would be helpful, and come back to all members by email if possible. I think that would be helpful, because I tend to share the concerns raised by my colleagues here. I've heard what you're saying, Mr. Daly, but for me, we need to let people see everything, because the rules are going to be the future rules. So everyone needs to know what we're proposing that the rules are. So you'd have to show the whole document to get the message over. So, but maybe we can get some clarity outside the meeting. Sorry, my screens went haywire, so I can't see who is next. So, Councillor Moore, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I fully support this for Kepty Pond and Kepty Park. We've got in there, we are referring to various things. I'm just wondering whether there has been any thought about, we just talked about bicycles. Is it possible to suggest that we should be looking at banning powered vehicles, given the number of reports we're getting from down south about these e-scooters and accidents that are being involved with them? So is that, and just on a comment, it may be worth having a Janet and John in some pre-Appleby's terms. It's just a small brief leaflet that summarises the rules.
Mr. Daly, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, the wording, I would refer to the wording again. I would need to read it again myself, but I think it refers to propelled vehicles. That I think that it could be interpreted that likes of electrical bicycles, electrical scooters could come under that. As I said, the feedback I think from officers, parks officers, is that it isn't a significant issue or nuisance that we receive. I do acknowledge that the use of these are on the increase, and it might be something in the future we need to give more consideration to. But as it stands, it's not something that causes us a lot of reports to our parks team. And as I said, I would refer you to the rules, and it does make reference to propelled vehicles rather than motor car vehicles.
Could I just come back with a supplementary?
No, I'm sorry. It's no one question. I need to be fair. You're next.
Yes, thanks, convener. Well, Councillor Moore has kind of come up with a suggestion that I was going to propose regarding, we see that toys and model aeroplanes and model boats, we're precluding motorised ones. And I would have thought that we could do the same with vehicles, preclude motorised vehicles. But my point was more to do with, I hear exactly what Councillor Cheek's saying, 10 pages long, who's going to read it? Well, I would certainly hope that the vast majority of Kempty Park users are not going to be reading all these rules, and they're certainly not going to. But what a comprehensive rule book allows is clarity on what council officers or council agents can enforce should the need arise, and that's really why you need a comprehensive. It's not really for the public to know every bit of it, but when if the council is going to be taking a soft touch approach to enforcement of all this, then it gives them clarity as to what they can enforce should they feel the need to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, we'll move to comments. Anybody got a comment? No. Okay, we can go to the recommendations then. These recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Agreed.
So if we now move to number 12, which is the application for consent to place tables and chairs on a public road at the Corn Exchange Marketplace in Arbroath. So maybe some of the Arbroath councillors to the proposals, if anybody wants to say something.
Yes, convener.
Councillor Burnett.
We've got tables and chairs out there at the moment, and I never see anybody sitting on them, maybe 2 people at a time. I don't think we need to move them any more around the corner. The area that's proposed is next to the bike shelter, across from the entrance to the toilets, and it's also next to where the recycle cycle place is. And they sometimes have cycles sitting outside there for holiday makers to pick up and hire. So I think with all that going on, we really don't need any more tables and chairs out there. You've got to think about people that have got sight problems. You have to think about people that are trying to clear the street. Also, we're not supposed to have parking there, but we do get the odd person dropping off somebody that has mobility issues to maybe go into the hairdressers there. There's a lot going on, and they've got enough tables and chairs out at the moment, and I really don't think we need any more. And it's not a particularly nice place to sit. It's very cold and dark, and there's nothing inviting about having to sit there and have a drink. So that's my opinion on it. And I know that they have a license for the outside. But I really don't think we need any more street furniture in this area. Thank you.
Okay, can I just check then, are you moving that we don't accept this?
I wouldn't accept it. I move that we should they've got enough what they have at the moment, you know, as the building has. So obviously if anybody else has, I mean, Lois is on the call if other opinions, but I personally don't think we need any more street furniture and table in this particular area.
We'll leave you with that at the moment, and we'll ask questions, and we'll see if you get a seconder. But Councillor Speed next. Have you got a question?
It's probably more of a comment, but just a question around how perhaps key stakeholders haven't been invited perhaps for a kind of site walk around. You know, it does show that there might be negative impact on pedestrians, especially those with perhaps a mobility or sensory difficulty. So I too would be concerned that we're not actually going to maximise people's kind of pedestrian and active travel experience along that stretch. And I certainly, just even over the last few months, have had constituents come to me that are challenged by kind of street clutter, street furniture, and the impact that has on them getting around. So yeah, disappointed to see that there hasn't been any engagement and seeking local views, and also a site visit would have been really helpful. But yeah, I'd be more inclined to yeah, unless we can have that before we reach a decision. If not, I think it would have to be no at this stage.
Can you just expand on what you mean by the key stakeholders that should be consulted?
Well, just in terms of in the equality impact assessment, there hasn't been any consultation with kind of key stakeholder groups or individuals. So perhaps kind of our local disability forum and access panel, or, you know, groups that represent people with disability, our guide dogs for the blind, people that would be able to give a kind of informed kind of contribution as to the type of challenges that they experience while trying to navigate our high streets and town centres and places of leisure.
Okay, can I get an officer to come in and tell us what the normal process would be in dealing with an application like this, who the stakeholder consultees are, please?
Thank you, convener. If I may, we excuse me, contact the local members to seek their views. We obviously take a view from a roads perspective. This is a request to occupy part of the road network, and in this instance we've taken the view that given the width of the area in Gravesend and leading into Marketplace, that there's adequate space for this application to be approved, which is why it's been recommended for members to decide.
Okay, I accept that, but my point really is what's the normal process from your teams for the stakeholder consultation? I appreciate we speak to the local members and you would have done that and that's been fed into the report, but what do we do?
That was my description, sorry, Councillor, if I wasn't clear. That is my description of the normal process. We wouldn't go to consult if there's adequate footway width on these applications, and we're normally looking for 2 metres, which is the standard width of our footways, and in this case, obviously, there's more at this particular site. So in applications of this nature, we would grant applications if there's a remaining footway width of 2 metres. One of the conditions, or some of the conditions, relate to how the area is cordoned off in terms of fencing and barriers, etc., so that the area is distinguished.
Okay, thank you. Right. Councillor Moore, I think you're next.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I've already seen this application through licensing, so I'm going to be careful about what I say. This is the 3rd application. They asked, then they've asked for a 2nd area. Now they're asking for a 3rd area. Now looked at a photograph, and as Councillor Durno says, it's between the steps at the entrance and the bike sheds, which seems to be across the disabled access. And I'm just wondering if this is correct, and if so, what our officers' views are on the access having tables and chairs across it.
Does Mr. Cochrane want to address that comment?
Thanks, Councillor Moore. I did respond to your email yesterday. The access that I think has a small ramp to it, we don't believe is an access to the premises itself for customers. We don't know whether it's a beer cellar or what it is, but if you look at the plan in Appendix 2, the red area marked there doesn't obstruct any access into the premises.
Okay, Councillor Duff, I think you're next.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I'm quite happy to second Councillor Durno's move to reject it. I have a question. I think I know the answer to the question, but I'll ask it anyway. Given that this is council property, is the council getting any remuneration from the public house for this facility?
Mr. Cochrane.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. We charge for granting the permission and the inspections and checks that take place as part of that. We don't charge any rent for the use of the public road.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Braze, I think you're next.
Yes, well, Councillor Duff has asked the question I was going to ask and has agreed to second Councillor Durno's motion. Community groups have to pay money to rent council parks for a day, somewhere around £65, I think. And yet, you know, in this case, a national chain is to be getting this for nothing. Just seems bizarre to me.
Mr. Cochrane, do you want to I don't know how this works. Do we have a policy, or we don't have a policy, or how does it work?
We had a policy on tables and chairs, and as I said, it's an application to occupy part of the public road. It's not been something that we've considered charging, and it may be feasible to charge events like this. That, of course, would also then apply to small cafes and the likes on our high street. And I suppose there's a balance between the economic development and the support of the hospitality sector, particularly post-COVID, but also in terms of creating that cafe atmosphere and attracting people into our town centres. If it's something that members are minded that they would support, we could certainly explore a charging system for premises that have taken occupation of the road in examples such as this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMillan Douglas, I think you're next.
Yes, thank you very much, convener. I first must note that, of course, I'm not a member for Arbroath, and therefore, in one sense, don't have the same personal knowledge as a number of speakers do have. On the other hand, I, like you, convener, are working hard to try and regenerate the Angus economy, or more properly put, to allow private sector people to regenerate their own businesses and their own economy over the coming months and years. And I think we've got to be terribly careful we don't turn into Mr. and Mrs. Negativity, just saying no to everything. I mean, I know this little area around what I find an extremely welcoming public house, which I enjoy having a drink in, and I would also enjoy having a drink outside it. And whilst I realise that there may need to be more consultation with interested groups, I can't really comment on that, but I can see the arguments for it. I'd be very loath to just turn this down when you have an enterprising business trying to regenerate itself.
Okay,
thank you, convener.
Councillor Stewart, I think you're next.
Is this comments or questions, convener?
Questions at the moment, please.
Okay, no, mine's as a comment.
Councillor MacDonald, please, you got a question?
No, it's a yes.
All right. Councillor Speed, you've already asked the question. I'm leaning towards actually a site visit here. I think that might be the way forward. Many members present are not familiar with this area. But if there's a view we don't have a site visit and we want to move to a decision today, I'm in the hands of the committee. So who's put their hand up? But you have a view about a site visit? We'll move that bit first.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Mark, as well. I think that would be good to be
I
able
think
to
to
walk
be
behind
fair
them.
to the applicant, as I'm trying to be as the convener here and not take a position at the moment, to be fair to the applicant, I think before we make a decision, it might be helpful to have a site visit, and then we can bring it back either to a special communities or to the next. We can find a committee. We can bring it back as soon as possible once the site visit. I don't want to delay this if it's a positive response. So, can I get a view of a site visit?
Yeah, site visit.
Yes, we'll go for a site visit.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going for a site visit.
Yep.
Convener.
So, hello, Councillor Moore.
Yes, convener.
When is it coming? You might be able to help me, Councillor Moore. When is it coming to licensing?
I believe it's already been through.
What's been through? Right.
If we're going to have a site visit, like we do in Development Standards or Development Management Review Committee, can we please have an unaccompanied one, which is where we do not have the applicant on the site. We are simply there to look at it, and then we can look at it independently without hearing one side or the other.
Yeah, I wasn't intending really to be inviting the applicant. I think my thought was we would visit it just so we can see for ourselves how it's working at the moment and where the extra area that they're asking for is, and to see the points that's been raised by the local members about different access issues. That was my logic, but I'm in the hands of my fellow colleagues about how we do this. So, Mr. Cochrane, how would we go about doing a site visit then?
Thank you, Councillor Convener. I would suggest that through committee services, we look at a suitable date when members are available and just agree to meet on site on that time and day, and we'll email it you and put it in your diaries. I think, as perhaps Councillor Moore has suggested, if that doesn't involve any arrangements with anybody else, it would simply be a case of yourselves looking at the site and make it as simple as that.
Okay, I've actually got a Cochrane. I am aware that we need to have a site visit to Arbroath Harbour in the very near future for all committee members of the Communities Committee. So maybe we could tie up both visits at the same time. That would probably make common sense.
Good idea.
Excellent suggestion.
Okay, so can I leave that with yourself to sort out? So am I going to defer this report? Or the committee's going to agree to defer this report until we've had a site visit? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Great, thank you. So if we move on to number 13, which is the Winter Road Service Policy and Provision for 21-22. I think it might be helpful, though he doesn't know I'm going to ask him to do this, if we have Mr. Cochrane or if Mr. Scott's on the call, just give us an overview of this and why it's coming today in conjunction with the work that the MOG's currently doing on, just so there's clarity here about why it's here today before the MOG's finalised any proposed changes that may come back to the Communities Committee for agreement.
Sure, convener. No problem at all. Mr. Scott's not with us today, so I'm happy to lead on this. No problem. Yeah, we have traditionally brought the winter maintenance policy to you on an annual basis. Sometimes in August, a little bit later this year, given that we've got a meeting in September, and it simply comes to you to reinforce the situation prior to heading into. As I say, when it comes in August, it's normally on a sunny day and it's difficult to get one's mindset around the approach of winter, but perhaps a little bit cooler weather just now. We can see that winter's around the corner, and it really just reminds everybody and includes, if this hits some of the press and we get through the message, just being prepared for winter in the way that the service is. It sets out our policy. It sets out our operational processes to get there, the amount of salt that we've got on order, and the likes, and a useful reminder to members of the routes that we treat and the hours that we treat, and the services that we deliver. This year's policy is very similar to previous years. One of the things that we've taken winter maintenance review and the feedback that we've had from the consultation is just in a little bit of our terminology, in that under the Road Scotland Act, and without getting too legal, the terms of carriageways and that people regularly use, the terms roads and pavements. So we've changed some of that around in the document this, and otherwise the policy and the detail is very similar. Well, the policy is the same, and the detail is very similar to previous years. So I'll probably pause at that point, and obviously I see you has got a question.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Proctor, is that a question you've got?
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. Good standard operational procedure there, Mr. Cochrane. I just, and it's a pretty parochial one. I noticed that on page 225, you know, the areas in the various towns and that to be cleared. At Kirriemuir, we've got the Brechin Road. Does that include Cemetery Road as well? They normally do it because it's a kind of priority to keep the road clear for funerals. But I just wonder, you know, is that an omission, or when you say Brechin Road, you're including Cemetery Road?
Mr. Cochrane.
Thanks. That list is unchanged from many years. As you say, if Cemetery Road is getting done at the same time, otherwise Cemetery Road would get done as a non-priority. But I'll check the details on that, because that, as I say, is unchanged from previous years. And thank you for your comment about bringing it forward as a good practice.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore, excuse me. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm very happy that it shows the roads that are being dealt with in the towns and villages, and I think that's marvellous. However, when you come to the rural areas, I'm just trying to find the right page. Right, like on page 226, it says that we grit to the B9128. Now, the B9128 is 13.3 miles long, according to Google. Wondering, you know, giving just a road name or the road number is not particularly helpful. Giving like the unclassified U305 from A92 via Dobbies to C4 is more helpful. Is it possible to get this more detailed so we understand where it's being done in the rural areas?
Excuse me, Mr.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Moore, for yourself, Convener. I note your point, Councillor Moore, and it tends to be the roads engineers who know the number of each and every one of their flock, so to speak. I would refer to you to the website that we have on winter maintenance, which has an interactive map that one can zoom into and can see the priority routes on that. But I'm happy to take away your suggestion to perhaps give a little bit more of a descriptor on the rural network. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cheek, you're next.
Thanks, Convener. It's really just a question for Mr. Cochrane. Ian, I think you've kind of mentioned, you've given the game away, that this list hasn't been looked at for streets or reviewed for some considerable time. And just when I don't want to give any way of streets in Carnoustie, but there are a number of streets in there on priority routes that I can't understand why they're there, to be frank. I'm thinking maybe in the old days when there was a school at the Kinloch Primary School, I can understand why maybe one or two streets there were on it, but what things like Kinloch Park and Ruxton Place, which are small cul-de-sacs, and I can't really understand why. And then I've got another street, Westhaven Park, which is as far away from a school as many other streets closer to it that are not on the list. My point really is it worthwhile councillors reviewing this list and coming back to you with maybe 1 or 2 suggestions for changes, perhaps, because there are a few on mine and Carnoustie that I don't think are entirely relevant, but there are other streets that probably are.
I think it's worth saying that part of the work that the MOG's going to do, and we've not got to that stage yet, is exactly what Councillor Cheap's speaking about. So that work will be done as we move forward. That was one of the whole ideas of setting up the winter review. But sorry, Mr. Cochrane, speaking.
Yeah, for yourself, Convener, I'm always happy to hear elected members' suggestions, and particularly if it's for something that you feel can be taken off the list and maybe something more of a priority added. So more than happy to take those, Councillor Cheap. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Durno, please.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to ask Mr. Cochrane, he said that they've got the salt in order. Has he had assurances that we're going to actually get it? Because obviously problems we're getting stock at the moment. And have you had confirmation from Tayside Contracts that they will have enough staff for the I was going to say digger drivers? It's not the snowplows, because they did say a few years ago that a lot of the people that they had, the personnel that were driving the snowplow, were from Poland, etc. And obviously with the HGV drivers, do we have assurances that we have enough staff and salt to get this done? Because I'm a bit worried about that. Thank you.
Mr. Cochrane.
Thank you, Councillor Durno. Yes, I can give an assurance around the salt. We have what we call the brown or the rock salt already in Forfar Depot. The marine salt is currently in Dundee waiting collection, and some of that is waiting for HGVs to be available post some of the farming harvesting work that they're involved in at the moment. In terms of drivers, clearly there's lots of conversations around at the moment about HGV drivers, but Tayside Contracts do have a reasonably stable workforce in that, although of course they do have turnover as most organisations. It's certainly not something that's been highlighted to us at the moment, but we would be in discussion with them if there was any difficulties. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Speed, I think you're next.
Yep, thanks, Convener. Yeah, obviously the health and safety and well-being of our residents is important all year round, but even more critically during these kind of winter months. It does say in the report that there has been consultation with the police and the Health and Social Care Partnership, and I just wondered what kind of contribution the Health and Social Care Partnership made to this report and what their views and perhaps suggestions were.
Mr. Cochrane.
Thanks. I'm not particularly aware of anything specific picked up this year. We've certainly had conversations in the past, and as soon as we get into more challenging winter conditions, and as we did over the last year and through some of the discussions around the pressures on the health service of breaks and broken wrists and sprained ankles and whatever from falls. I think that's why we need to continue with our priority footway gritting and set out where we do grit so that people can take appropriate care elsewhere. And sadly, of course, some people fall within their own property on the back doorstep or you know, on their own drive. So nothing too specific, Councillor Speed, but I'll happily there was anything I can raise it to you.
That was a point, Mr. Cochrane, that the MOG did make, that we should be engaging with our partners to get their view, IGB, NHS, Tayside, etc. So I'm sure that'll be being done behind the scenes. Okay, anybody else got any further questions? No. Anybody got any comments? No. Okay, I'll just flick back to the recommendation. Sorry. 2 seconds. such a long report. There we go. So are we happy to agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of this meeting. So thank you very much. And
Thanks, convener.
See you soon. Thanks very much. Bye.